That is the
cool
coolest thing.
What's that?
You don't like your Michael Giacchino.
Oh.
Apologies.
Let's put this here. So, anyway, yeah, that microphone is awesome.
Thank you.
How's it work? I mean, not how technically, but does it work well?
Yeah, it works pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Absolutely. Sound is important.
All right, well, what do you want to know? How do you want to do this?
Well, I want to start with Kate. Kevin, I love your music.
Oh, thanks.
I've seen this kind of particular process you have with superhero movies, like the balance between the human part and the superhero part, and you mix it all together in a big suit, like you did with Spider-Man. How is that process? The final convergence of all the sounds.
Well, for me, it's always about first figuring out, okay, who is this character and what are they really like? Peter, I think, is actually in a lot of ways sort of a frustrated and sad character, So I'm always want to make sure that works first. I want to get at the heart of that because I know that is going to be what the audience connects to, because that's what I connect to when I'm watching something, and it's about me. Again, watching the movie and then getting a feeling for how did I feel when I watched this movie. It made me feel a certain way. It made me feel sad. It made me feel, brave or triumphant. All of those things. I try to track all those emotions that I experience while watching it, so that when I'm writing music, hopefully, it's a true reflection of what the characters are feeling. So it's not. I never am like, oh, this is a scary scene, so I'm just going to write scary music. It's always. I feel scared for these people, so I'm going to write. This music is how I felt. So it's a very literal translation of my emotions and my feelings, which can get exhausting at the end of the day because you're then taking on all of this and you're feeling all of these things. It's a lot like being an actor in certain respects, the way that they take on the characters and the emotions. I did the same thing. So it always starts there because I just want to make sure that the audience connects with the movie the way that I connect with it, because I'm very choosy about the ones I work on. Yep.
And making a Spider-Man movie, how did you take like other composers' stuff, because there's a previous one, right? And it kind of sounds like a progression of the
No,
story.
it's all. I mean, I didn't use any of the previous movies as a reference for anything. Like, to me, because this is a brand new version of Spider-Man, and it doesn't. When those things are written in the way that I was talking about, writing something specifically for, those composers probably did the same thing, so it wouldn't be right to use that. Now, we did have some fun with the old 60s Spider-Man theme, Spider-Man, which we would just use in the first film. We used in the opening for the logos over the Marvel logos. But outside of that, it's all stuff written specifically for these characters in this situation and this thing. Now, I will use, if it works, I will use Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme sometimes, just in case, if you're dealing with Tony Stark and you're dealing with the Avengers in some way, sometimes it's appropriate to do that. And I love Alan, so it's always fun to kind of like do a thing for that. But outside of that, it's all new stuff.
So you were saying you make sad music when it's a sad album. What makes music sad?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know, but I know that I can sit down at a piano and play a certain thing and have it make me feel even sadder than I was feeling when I felt it. You know what I mean? It's about. There's something about music that goes straight to the core of your emotions. You don't have to do anything other than just listen to it, and you can feel it. We've all have heard pieces of music, I'm sure, and you have ones that when you hear every time, it brings you back to a certain place, brings you back to a certain thing that happened or a certain emotion, and it's a real voodoo trick how it works. And I still don't quite understand it, how it does. I just know that I feel things when I play a certain way or play a certain thing, Yeah.
Speaking of voodoo tricks, you mentioned using Alan Silvestri's score, and you mentioned, I'm curious, as composers, do you guys get together? Do you create a sort of like an MCU of music, so to speak,
No,
like a shared universe?
it would be nice if we did that, but no, and there's usually never any time to do that, because there's no grand plan for how these movies are going to come out and how they're going to be made. So there's, I talk to Kevin Feige about that a lot. Actually, I wish that as we move forward, we pay more attention to creating this, not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also the audio version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that things are coherent, things remain, you know, and if a character pops up in another film, it's fun for the audience to hear that theme show up. It's a great, you know, it's always a great Easter egg, and it's a direct emotional tie to that character, you know. And when they don't do that, I feel like they're missing a really wonderful opportunity to give the audience an extra jolt.
So, like, just as, I'm sorry, I'm a Marvel outlet, so I'm like, let's take Doctor Strange, for instance. I have a feeling Doctor Strange is going to play a big role in Phase 4, and we've had a lot of Spider-Man questions. What kind of process did you go through to create, like, the Doctor Strange music? Because some of it is very ethereal, some of it, like, you're using a lot of different instruments, a lot of different music.
Well, I know with Doctor Strange, I always loved that comic as a kid. I always thought it was really cool and psychedelic and weird and fun, so I wanted to do that with the music as well. But I also wanted this very Baroque sort of feel, something that felt kind of timeless and that felt like it could really have come from anywhere. And that's why I wanted to use the harpsichord. I think there's something about the sound of a harpsichord which just instantly puts you in a frame of mind, which seemed to work really well for that character, you know. So in terms of him, it all started really just with a very simple theme on the harpsichord. And I remember that was the first thing I played for them, was just that theme on the harpsichord. And it was like, and they were like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. Yeah, this is like, that feels like Doctor Strange. And that's what I'm always shooting for when I'm playing music for the people that I'm working with, is I want them to hear something and go, that feels like my movie. That feels like my movie.
You mentioned comic book history of these characters. How much do you look back at the comic book legacy while you're composing? How much does that influence you from your background?
Well, I grew up reading a lot of these comic books, so it's sort of built into me. Like I'm already there with it when I'm working on them. But occasionally, what's fun is like I'll email Kevin Feige or text him and say, hey, there's this one scene I'm working on right now. Is there something in particular you were thinking about? And he will immediately respond with a panel from a very particular
That's cool.
Spider-Man comic book. And in particular, it was like for Homecoming, this happened. We were talking about the scene where the concrete falls on Peter and everything is done and he's going to be, it's over. The movie's over. He lost. And then, but of course, he sort of gathers his strength and lifts the concrete off of him. And he sent me an image from one of the original Spider-Man comics of that panel, and that's how they got that idea. And he goes, it needs to feel like this panel. It needs to feel like this. And I was like, okay, I get it completely. You know.
So you're saying that you're a fan of these comics. Hypothetically, do you have a character in particular that you'd like to compose for, or?
Well, Spider-Man was always one of my favorites. I love Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. So I feel like I got so lucky and able to doing both those movies, because when I heard that they were making those movies, I just reached out directly to Kevin. I was like, I want to do that one. I love Spider-Man, or I love, and I was like, those are ones that are for me. It gets harder for me in dealing with things like the Avengers because you have so many characters. So me personally, I like zeroing in on one person's journey. You know what I mean? And there can be sub-characters and villains, of course, but I really like it when I can focus on that. So that's why I love like Doctor Strange, Spider-Man. When you do the Avengers, it's a much different proposition, and you're always sort of like, wait, who am I following? What am I doing? It's hard.
Now, forgive me if I get this wrong. I accidentally left my notes on the bus. But you've composed for television as well?
Oh yeah, I did. Yep.
So, how does it differ from composing for television as opposed to composing for film?
Television, it's always, the budget is one thing. You don't get as much time and as much resources to complete what you have to complete. So I did all of Alias and all of Lost. And Lost, I would have like 3 days to write a score, and then we would record every score with an orchestra separately. Every episode had its own original score to it. But it was tough, and you're week after week just doing that, 3 days, and then recording, and then mixing, and then when you get home, there's another episode on your desk. You're like, it like never ends,
So what you're saying is you want to record. We all want to compose for film. Don't compose for TV. If the right TV thing came around, I would definitely do it. But it's hard now with
with all the movies that I'm doing. It's just hard because it's a constant thing. So
Let's see.
When you are doing movies, where in the process do you decide the musical signature? Where does it come together for you after seeing individual scenes?
Well, I try to watch the whole movie in one shot when for the first time. I try not to read a script, because if I read a script, I envision a particular movie in my head, and then always when I go to see whatever they have done, it's completely different than what I had. And I had been working all these things in my head, and I go to see them, and I'm like, oh, that's nothing like what I thought. So I try not to read scripts. I just go to see the whole movie and try, and then I'll go home and I'll sit at the piano and I'll just sort of put my hands down on the keys and see what happens, and at some point I'm going to stumble across something that again feels like the movie to me, and I'll follow that path and from there create a suite which I can play for them and say, here's how I think your movie sounds, here's how it felt to me, and then I play it back for them, and then we're off to the races doing the score.
And doing so many movies, where you can find your signature, like, because there are so different characters, different stories, but how can we find you in all those stories?
I think you can always find me in there somewhere. I particularly I do like to make each score sound like its own thing, so that it isn't just the same music over and over that I'm writing. That's why I like to use and look for instrumentation that is different, like the harpsichord, or find different ways of sort of characterizing a story or a main character. But I think if you really analyzed it all, you would find a lot of me across the board in there.
Hey, sorry to interrupt with me, Rotate. So, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you guys. Yeah,
It was a real
thank you.
pleasure.
Yep, nice to meet you.